Welcome to Writing on Wednesdays, where I give writing advice and answer questions that you have and offer writing tips and tricks. One of the most common questions I get is how to deal with writer's block or how to deal with getting unstuck when you're writing. The thing with writer's block, or anytime that you get stuck when you're writing a book, is that how to overcome it really depends on what the reason is for the getting stuck. What is the actual blockage? And I face different blockages while I'm writing, and there's different solutions for each one. So I'm just going to talk about some of the ways that I have overcome various blockages, and hopefully that will give you some tips and tools to overcome it for yourself. I would say that the most common kind of blockage that I would come up against is more of just like, I don't want to do it kind of thing. And that's where you just have like too many distractions and you just don't feel like working. And even though I love writing, and I do love writing, there's something about that I think most people, like, it's just like, I don't want to go to work, and you kind of put it off even if it's something that you really enjoy. The key thing with that is to remove all distractions. If you can lock yourself in a windowless room with no internet, that would probably really help writing, because your mind is going to get bored, and if you give your mind just a blank page, it's going to fill it. That's always been my experience to get over like those humps when I'm just not in the mood to write. And usually once I get going and get over that, it flows a lot easier. I've also switched over from, I no longer type my first drafts. I handwrite all my first drafts, and that has been really, really great for me. And it's been a lot easier for me to connect with my writing and to not get distracted and to not have those like, I just don't want to write today kind of blahs. But what I'm describing there is also kind of just the butt in chair method, which is where to write you just have to put your butt in the chair and just kind of have to stay true. It's easy to get distracted and to find something else fun to do, but writing is fun and your mind will go to it if you remove all the other distractions. But that is for like a minor blockage. Another type of blockage that I have encountered is there's something wrong with this book. That's what I can call this one. And that's where it's actually something, the issue is with the book itself, the particular book. Like if you were like, let me write like literally anything else I could write, it's if the work is with this particular book. And I've encountered that for a couple of different reasons. One of the most public ones that I struggled with was when I couldn't write the final book in the My Blood Approved series. So that one had happened for me, and I'll just give you a little bit of background. And I had written 4 books in my vampire series, My Blood Approves, and I had published them very close together. But because I had written them before I had started self-publishing, and I just published them all together. And these were the first books that I published, and some people really loved them, but I also got some incredibly eviscerating reviews, we'll say. And they really got into my head, and I read them, and I had not developed a thick enough skin for it yet, because it was my first books out. And so then I had in my head all these voices who had just torn apart every aspect of my book, and so it was very difficult for me to connect with the book, because every time I would touch the book, all I could hear was all the characters are awful, the plots are awful, everything you want to do is awful. And so it was really hard for me to connect and write, because I don't want to write something that's awful, but I also know that people liked it, and so I didn't want to change it dramatically to please these reviewers who were never going to like it anyway. But I felt like it would be trash if I didn't, and so I just couldn't move forward, and I really struggled with that one. With that in particular, the only thing I could really do was give it time, and that is the case with certain books. So the only thing you can do is give yourself time. If it's too personal, if it's too hard, if there's some actual like pain going there, sometimes the only answer is to put time between you and the work. And it took me 6 years to write that book. But in those 6 years, I had finally managed to, get negative reviews and positive reviews, and understand myself more as an author and what I have to offer and what my strengths and weaknesses are. And I was able to separate myself from the reviews, and they didn't hurt so bad. And then also I went back and reread the books, and I realized that yeah, they're not like perfect, but there was a lot of stuff in there that I really liked, and I had a lot of fun writing them, and I had a lot of fun reading them. And then that made it a lot easier for me to connect with and finally write the final book. There are other times where there's an issue with the book because the book just isn't quite right. There have been books that I've scrapped because I realized they just weren't working. If there are elements that work, I'll try to cannibalism if I can, but sometimes it just isn't the right book, and that's a hard thing to figure out. But if you're really struggling and if you're trying other things and you can't get past it, then I would suggest setting this book aside and trying to work on something else for a little bit, especially if it's not anything that you have on contract. I mean, just set it aside and work on something else. And that doesn't, I know that can be hard for especially for early writers. I know in my earlier process, it was, I would start things all the time, but I would never finish them. So it's not always the best advice to say, you know, set it down and move to another thing. But I think that sometimes that is the only advice, because sometimes the project isn't quite right. Some books that you write to will just be learning experiences, because you'll realize that they aren't working. Also, if you're struggling with writing, it sometimes helps to take a look at what's going on in your life, because sometimes if you've got outside stressors and stuff going on, it can be hard to connect. Writing is a form of escape, and or it can be a form of escape. So sometimes when I'm stressed, I'll write a lot, but sometimes the stress is just so overwhelming that I'm not writing at all. And then there's other things going on in your life that can, you know, affect it. I lost 2 of my cats this past fall, and so since December I have not been writing very much, because I had a traumatic, unexpected death, and it has been hard for me to connect writing with how it was before. In general, actually, 2020 had been a good writing year for me, because I had just been able to just completely throw myself in the work. But you know, you can't escape from everything, and sometimes it's okay to, you need to be kind to yourself, and also not push yourself to do things if it's not the right thing for you right now. And I think it's okay to give yourself time, and to give yourself space, and to give your books and your words space too sometimes if you need to. Other cases of writer's block, I think for me, can also be is sometimes I'm trying to force myself to write a book that isn't my book to write. Like, I think it sounds like a good idea, but it's not my book, you know? Once you figure out, it was harder for me before I figured out my voice, but I feel like I figured out who I am and what I want to say and what connects with me. But sometimes there's stories that I like, but they're not the stories that drive me, because I like a lot of different, you know, things. I'll read a lot of different books, and I consume all kinds of media, but that doesn't mean that I want to, or I'm able to create all kinds of media. And some people can, you know, each person is different. So I'm really just talking about what I feel like are my strengths and weaknesses, and where what works for me. But you can look at your own strengths and weaknesses and see, is this something that I actually excel at? Is this something that I want to do? Is this what drives me, or is this just something because I think it's cool? And I know that sounds kind of like a weird mixed bag, because yeah, you should write books that you think are cool, you know, but well, for example, for me, this past fall, I wanted to write a sci-fi novel, and I couldn't get my head in the space to write sci-fi, and so I went back to a gothic romance, and I've just been flying through it, and it's been really great and super wonderful. And that was because I want to write sci-fi because I like sci-fi, but there is some kind of blockage that I am having right now with it, and maybe that's something that I'll figure out and I'll work through, but also maybe that's just not something that I want to do right now, you know? And so it's kind of trying to figure out, what actually do I want to do? What do I want to say? What stories are interesting me, and why are they interesting me? And that's something too, if you're looking at a story and you're looking at, well, why am I writing this? Like, think about, why does this interest me? Where does it want to go? And sometimes that can help you get unstuck too, because maybe the problem is you were writing about A, B, and C, and A is what's driving you, but now you're kind of stuck because you've been focusing on C. And sometimes you can cut that, or change it, or twist it, or maybe just bring more of A back in, depending on what it is. And A can be, you know, it can be a trope that you love. It can be a character that you love. It can be just certain elements of the genre. It doesn't really matter, but there's something there that made you say, I want to tell this story. I want to read this story. And that's what you need to stay with. Whatever nugget in there is the thing that is lighting your fire. Figure out what that is and stay with that. Other reasons for having issues with stories, I think, and these are just general things that I've encountered, like either sometimes for myself or I've heard about with other people, but I think that not knowing where the story is going, so sometimes taking a step back and plotting and figuring out, it always helps me if whatever chapter I'm on, I need to know like what's going to happen in the next 2 chapters. Like, I have to be drafted like at least that far. My outlines have gotten a lot more immediate, I used to outline like the whole book before the end, and it kind of, that's a whole separate post. We'll go into that in a different post. But the moral of my story is having a little bit of an outline might help you if you don't want to know where the story is going. Just trying to figure out what will be happening in the next few chapters will make it easier for you to go forward, because you might just be floundering in the dark because you haven't figured out, you know, where the story is unfolding. Sometimes figuring out where the story is going to go is also saying what is definitely not going to happen, what you want, you don't want to happen if you're kind of stuck. So, you know, if you've got a character locked in a room, you know for sure you don't want them still in the room by the next chapter, then you'll be like, okay, how am I going to get them out? Or maybe you really do want them in the next chapter, and then you're like, all right, what are they going to do then inside the room? You know what I mean? It can add different... figuring out what you want and what you don't want can also help you figure out where the story is going. And especially when I was younger and I was first writing stuff and I was figuring stuff out, and it still happens now sometimes, but I think it was more common for me then, was I would have ideas for a scene or a character, and it was just something that I wanted to like kind of play around it with for some reason, but it didn't really go anywhere because there actually wasn't a plot. I kind of forgot to put a plot in there, and that can be part of it too. Is sometimes you just really like the characters of the world, and you still need to have a plot in there. So maybe just take a look at the plot and what the story is going. What's going to happen? Where is the character going to be? How are they going to get there? You know, just little things like that can help you maybe get unstuck a little bit. And the biggest advice that I always give, finally, just in general, if you're feeling unstuck, or if you're feeling stuck or uninspired at all, is take a step back from writing, and then you need to feed your creativity. And I think the best way to feed creativity is by consuming media and entertainment that excites you, or nature, just anything, just because you want to get the juices flowing in your brain, and so it needs to see things and be exposed to things. So reading books, watching movies, listening to music, going for walks, having experiences, but doing something other than just sitting on the couch and playing on your phone, which, I don't know, maybe I'm calling you out or calling myself out, but that will really help feed your creativity, because your mind, your creativity can get bored and sluggish too. And so if you're just feeling like in general stuck, I think it helps to just kind of find things that inspire you and refill that kind of creativity bank, get a good night's sleep, drink a lot of water, and then go back tomorrow and see how you feel. But it also, again, like I said, it takes try and figure out where the blockage is coming from. And sometimes it is just that you just need inspiration, or you need a break, or that you're short on sleep. You know, I mean, those are any kinds of things that can actually make the writing process a little more tricky. I hope that I've been helpful, and thank you for tuning in to this week's Writing on Wednesday. I will be back next week with more tips and tricks. And again, feel free to leave questions or comments, and I will try to answer them or incorporate them in future videos. Until then, I hope that you stay well, stay safe, and happy writing.